evening. I'd like to resume the call to order for this meeting. Earlier this evening, we did have an executive session on pending litigation, and we're simply resuming this meeting to start at the intended time of 7 o'clock as our public session. At this point, we'd like to go to our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two more announcements. Mrs. Rajat could not be here due to a work commitment, and our superintendent, Dr. Oliver Robinson, will be making an early departure. We'll simply resume the meeting with our deputy superintendent. So thank you very much for being here. At this point, can we adopt an agenda? Motion one from Naomi and second one from Todd. Sorry. All in favor? Okay, at this point, we'll turn it over to Board of Education comments and reports. Would you like to start off, please, Gusta?
Nothing at this time.
Okay.
First, I'd like to say, hope everybody got out to vote, those students that are eligible and adults. And if you haven't, you have until 9. I think it's a good reason to leave the meeting early. I also wanted to share that we just had the NISBA conference, and I think we're going to hear a little bit about how the resolutions went from Gary soon. But I just wanted to add that I thought it was really well done. I learned a lot. I attended the communication sessions, heard a very moving presentation by the former superintendent of Sandy Hook, the Newtown Public School District, and the lessons learned from Sandy Hook. That was really moving. I wanted to thank Dr. Wood and Dr. Robinson for their presentation during the super session on the last day. I know it's tough to do a presentation at that time. I was glad that I did get into it, and I was able to hear the second half of it was really well done, and thank you for representing Shen. That same weekend, I went to the Iolanthe performance. It's an operatic performance by our operatic, our chamber kids and the a cappella group. Mm-hmm. Sorry, it was hard to remember. The Corlears. Yeah. I couldn't believe that I was hearing opera from the kids. It was really well done. And then just a few days ago, we heard the 12 Angry Jurors, which was a spin on 12 Angry Men. I also found that to be a very realistic depiction of jury deliberation. The story dives deep into profiling and stereotyping. That was, I think the timing is also relevant. It resonates. And how it made the connection with empathy, and how we get there by realizing or recognizing that we do those things. And of course, it was kudos to all that made that happen, including the cameo from our principal. And of course, I have to say this: I was so excited. Our cross-country team, my son has been part of this team for all of his years in high school. This was the first year. They've won sectionals. They're going to states this coming weekend, so we're very excited about that. And then I get a roundup with, if you haven't signed up, please do come to the Veterans Day Dash. It's a 5K. It honors our veterans and supports our students, specifically our athletes that run indoor, outdoor track and cross country. I hope to see you next Monday. Thank you.
I have no comments. Karen?
I'm afraid I have that. First of all, I attended 2 meetings of organizations made up of school board members locally. One was the Capital Region School Boards Association, the other one was Saratoga County School Boards Association. We are no longer officially members of the latter organization, but I like to retain contact with the people and see what's going on and so forth, because the more people you have an opportunity to network with, the more you find out. With reference to the first meeting, there was a good presentation on community relations, primarily the involvement of parents and the importance of the involvement of parents in the schools, and getting them really involved with their kids' education. If they're not actively and positively involved in their kids' education, then all our efforts fall a little bit short of where we would like them to be. So that was significant. It was an intentional and well-designed program, which I understand now that our PTA Council actually has adopted as its approach to community relations, and as long as it's incorporated into the schools as well, that's fine. The presentation at Saratoga County was on cybersecurity. Oh my. It was almost overwhelming. But one of the things that resonated with me most was the issues relating to bring your own device. And we know how much of an asset they can be, but also when it comes to providing security and making sure that your system hasn't been breached and compromised and so forth, it definitely presents additional challenges. Okay, now the main thing here. I attended as a delegate to the business meeting of the annual convention. And while there were 20 resolutions that were presented, 18 of them which had been endorsed by the resolutions committee, the sum total was that 18 out of 20 were accepted. Both of our resolutions were passed. I would really like to speak to 3 or 4 of those. The first one that I knew was going to be very controversial was thrown out by the board of directors primarily to start a conversation. They understood that we had no position on gun control and control of guns in school other than that set forth by law, and felt that that was a void as far as the state organization was concerned. And basically, it came down to the fact that the resolution itself was so broad that there was a possibility for overreach. When it came to the amendment, it was perhaps too specific and too limited. So in other words, it was inadequate from my perspective. And I also knew, and it was clear, that it was going to be a highly politicized thing right from the beginning. What happened in the final analysis was that the whole thing was voted down in amendment and resolution. And for the very reasons that I mentioned. If it wasn't one, it was the other. But the primary thing was that it was such a potentially politically explosive thing that the members were reticent and didn't want to make a statement. So that took care of that. We presented a resolution, and this was the first one. This was one that was endorsed, and it called for not only expediting the process for 3020A, but also, and more importantly from my perspective, was the guarantee of just cause, or due process. The idea being that the application of due process would guarantee that any individual faced with charges that might lead to dismissal or any other punitive or correctional activity any action that was taken that was punitive would be deferred until such time as the case was fully adjudicated, or that is, they had reached a determination and that the position of the district had been upheld. When the resolution was passed, and I went to Jay Warona, sorry about that, he's chief counsel and assistant director for NISBA. I said, well, so that means that the resolution that was passed last year basically would allow school districts to withhold pay from a teacher or administrator under 2038 proceedings prior to the actual completion is now null and void. And he said, not so much. Of course, first of all, we have no power to change the law, and the law would have to go through the legislature. The reality is that it doesn't have much of a chance to get passed because there are political alignments in the legislature that probably wouldn't happen. From my perspective, I'm very happy with the fact that it wouldn't go through. I feel that it should be fully adjudicated, and it should reach the point where there is a determination of blame, if you will, whatever, before any penalty is imposed. But what I understand from Jay was that the Supreme Court has held that due process can be held to have actually been satisfied if there is a process outlined by which the bar is somewhat short of completion of the process. In other words, for instance, in this case, so many days of that the process for the 3020A has gone on for, say, 5-6 months. At that point, if there was a law providing for it, a district would be able to then withhold pay. This was primarily an economic thing, had to do with money. And yes, 3028 gets expensive. But to me, principle is not for sale. And you don't punish people until you have the basis for doing that. And to withhold pay is definitely punishment. You can say, oh, well, I'll restore them and make them whole at the end of the process. I'll give them back any pay that they haven't received. You don't have the capacity to make them whole. If they've had their house foreclosed on and they've lost their house, you can give them the money, but their house is gone. So to me, that just isn't a fair and just way of going forward. So I was very much against the resolution last year, and I would contend, given the rationale that we talked, that is incorporated in the resolution itself, saying that the process has to be completed before you give a penalty, that we do have justification for saying, well, okay, the Supreme Court has this bar, but we're going to follow this one. So that was that. Our resolution, Dr. Robinson being the author of it, and was number 19, and basically what it called for was training of all school board members and school administrators to make them more knowledgeable and sensitive to the operation of prejudice, racial prejudice, minority prejudice, in whatever form it happens to be, the role of racism, white privilege, and so forth, and how that is detrimental to everybody. We're primarily concerned about our students, of course, but it's detrimental not only to those groups that typically referred to as minorities, which is kind of demeaning in itself, or it can be, that this should not, that the practices that we have consciously and unconsciously in place, reinforced within our society by our government in many instances, should be acted against. That our students suffer when they do not have an opportunity to interact with people who are different and the same as they are. If you're talking about a group that, again, we sometimes call minority groups, if there are is there no representation of minority individuals that they interact with on a daily basis, then they do not have the role models and reinforcement of the idea that people like them are valued. And it also reinforces the negative idea that nothing of value can come from the experience and thoughts of a person who is unlike yourself if you happen to be in the majority. So this is, as far as I'm concerned, this was passed. There were a number of individuals from different school districts that came up afterwards and said, thank you. I'm so glad that you did this. It's long overdue, and indeed it is. We did have very effective support from our neighbor, Burnt Hills Ballston Lake. Their president happens to be a friend of mine, but he came up to me beforehand and he showed me the statement he was going to make, and it hit some of the strong points that I thought needed to be to be made. The last resolution is one that called for a change in the date in which, and by the way, it was voted down. It was not an endorsed resolution, but it was extremely close. I think with 8 votes difference between passing and not passing. It had to do with changing the date of, you could enter a child in a kindergarten. Now it's somewhere in 1st of December or thereabouts. It has to do with December. So any child born within the year that the child turns 5 that has a birthday up to December could go. This resolution would have changed it to September 1st. There would definitely be an impact in at least the first year by making the change. But there are already something like 30 states that is the case. Some people will say, well, if you change it, it only means that a different group of people will be the youngest group, which is true, but it misses the point that there is a certain level of maturity that we're trying to ascertain and trying to make sure that the kids meet that bar. And by moving the date back to September the 1st, you have something like 3 to 4 more months of maturity, and it would be probably an effective thing. I know there are a lot of people say, oh, my kids came in and they were late birthdays and they were fully successful. And other people say, I'm going to keep my kid out of school until they're, the next birthday comes around and they will go to kindergarten. And, that's all anecdotal, but we're talking about the general policy and the general impact on a whole population of kids. And I personally, obviously, I favor the change. As despite logistics and so forth, I do favor the change. But as I said, it went down. There was one last thing, and I told you I was going to go on for a long time. There were a couple of things that in the course of attending a meeting and also being involved in another effort. I'm a part-time United Methodist pastor, and I was asked to be the facilitator for a group of 6 or 8 churches in Fulton, Montgomery County. It's because that's where my church happens to be. And it's a program called Imagine No Racism. And I was exposed to a video there that I felt was extremely powerful and very enlightening. And then at the meeting that I just attended, the business meeting, at the very beginning there was another video, which was as powerful as any I've ever seen. I mean, when I watch it, I find it upsetting because it so clearly shows that we put kids at a disadvantage, not intentionally, but the cumulative thing is that it was called, by the way, the race of life, and we're not talking about race. We're talking about an actual contest, running contest, the race of life, and it talks subtitle white privilege. That's powerful. I've asked Dr. Robinson in one of our sessions here to share this with the board. That's relatively short. I think it's 4 or 5 minutes. The other one was something done by Dr. Robin DiAngelo, and it's called Deconstructing White Privilege. And this is extremely educational, made me aware of things that I really wasn't that cognizant of. My background is partly in graduate school was sociology, and despite that, I have to admit to ignorance. And this is a very, very enlightening thing. Some things that will be said probably are challenging, but some of the things that are said are so powerful and profound. So I've also asked that Dr. Robinson show that at one of our forthcoming information sessions. So with that, I've run on for quite a way, and I'm done.
Thank you very much. We did want to get one quick change to Dr. Robinson. You had mentioned one thing you
first of all, thank you for supporting my departure. Dr. Wood will come, Deputy Sue. Mrs. Chase will be here to introduce our architects and the presentation on the update on the capital project. We're pleased with the progress. And just one calendar piece, I'm not sure if I know board members like to go to Honor Societies on the 8th, the Math Honor Society induction is at 6. So I just thought about Friday, but I'm not sure if I mentioned that date or not in that. So again, thank you for supporting my daddy duties tonight. I'm solo dad, and I have to run in and grab my kid before she gets left out in the streets of Albany from her dance studio. So I'll be rushing down the highway to make sure.
High school east on the 8th?
Yes, high school east, I'm pretty sure. So again, Dr. Wood will be here. Mrs. Wetmore could address the construction issues as well as most of the business items as well. And thank you very much for the attendance at the sessions. I did 3 sessions at school boards, and it was great to have board members in the audience. Nice little friendly faces, so thank you very much for that presentation as well. And Bob will, again, we'll catch your bases in case there's anything from tonight you need.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to you. Do you want to make any comments?
No, I think I'm going to hold my comments to the end, but so just in the respect of time.
I've just got a couple of comments about the NISBA convention. This is probably my 6th time doing it. The presentations have improved progressively throughout this time. There are a lot of innovative districts out there that we can learn from. One presentation from the Long Island district really met the mark in terms of where I see a lot of anxiety amongst our high schoolers in terms of how people tend to be more separated than united within our school community. And I'll leave it at that. I'll probably circulate amongst us. Potentially there may be some videos that can be shared to give you an idea. But really some districts are really doing a great job that we can learn from. And we'll definitely factor that in the future. The level of interest piqued by our professional organizations, particularly the attorneys out there. One law firm presented a mock collective bargaining, and that really opened my eyes to how important it is the way things we do in New York State to make sure that everybody comes out of these things winning. I think that is something that we can always keep our eye on and continue to get better at. There was one presentation made by a very experienced special education attorney, and very passionate, and then pointing out that just some simple things, some simple practices amongst special education documentation, IEPs and such, where some districts fall way short of enabling their kids to progress. Quite an eye-opener, and this is something I'm also very interested in, just seeing how we do relative to that standard that he communicated. And lastly, just the fact that what our district does by presenting things that are just so much improved professional practices amongst educators. To me, that's a very straightforward way to address where education needs to be improved. We tend to, take the approach, and I saw this 6 or 7 years ago, that it has to be done through top-down, through ramming Common Core into the schools, ramming things like APPR in the state. And there's just a level of frustration that created a lot of log jams, whereas instead, the professional practices that can be communicated, whether it be by video, whether it be by presentation amongst experts that have said, I've done this recently and I want to share it with you. Phenomenal. I was very proud as a member of the Shenendehowa School District to be involved in sort of being the somewhat of a credit taker to the work done by Dr. Robinson and Dr. Wood, as well as by our administrative staff. So I want to say thank you very much for all the work that you put forward. That didn't happen by accident. A lot of work and a lot of thought went into it. And please keep doing that. Please keep improving it. So that's all I have. I'll turn it over to any comments that you would like to make. If not, we can continue with the agenda.
No, I think we can move right to the overview of capital projects.
Okay, we do have some public comments from students, so we'd like to bring students up first. I'll read through the standard language. This is an opportunity for the public to address the Board of Education. Any residents in attendance? I see some. If so, complete the comment form. The board will not address specific comments, but ask for your name and address in the event follow-up is necessary. We remind residents that the public comment portion of the meeting is only one item in a long agenda. We therefore ask each speaker to be as succinct as possible. Remarks be limited to 2 or 3 minutes. We would also expect residents to speak in a respectful and courteous manner to model proper civility and decorum for students. Residents may also contact the board by email at boe@chenet.org. All questions come to the Office of Public Information and are shared with the board and our superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions and concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions and concerns typically addressed by the superintendent and our designee. So go ahead, student representative.
Yes, so I don't have anything especially new to introduce tonight. Tomorrow will be the day of the Suburban Council Leadership Conference. A couple of board members will be there. Dr. Robinson will also be there to give a couple of comments on leadership. We'll be sending around 24 students, I think, and we're looking forward to a good day. Other than that, in November, we're looking to hold a speak out or a coffee talk, probably before Thanksgiving break. So we're reaching out to students on, like hot topics that they want to discuss. And this year we've established a new committee, the Political Action Committee, and we're hoping to see that as a new way, a new civically minded way to communicate with our constituents. Yeah, other than that. Happy election day.
Are there any other comments from the public? Sir, would you like to go ahead, please?
Yep.
Please drop it
Bring it
off.
up, yep.
Okay. Go ahead to the microphone so we can hear you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board tonight. My name is James Harris. I'm here as a resident and a grandparent of a Shenendehowa student to express my outrage at the district's actions revealed by the recent news reports by CBS 6 and the Daily Gazette regarding how the district has knowingly and blatantly broken the law year after year and put the health of the district's children at risk. I do not believe I can make my entire presentation in the 2 to 3 minutes the board allows the public, so I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version. Now, I do, however, have a more comprehensive version, which I will give to the board members and ask that the expanded version be included in full in the minutes of this meeting. That version includes a copy of Chapter 85 of the laws of 2010, a copy of the guidance issued regarding the intent of the law, a Department of Environmental Conservation pesticide management document for the schools, further state guidance on Chapter 85 regarding emergency pesticide application at schools, a lawn and garden pesticide document issued by the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and a copy of my complaint to the New York State Attorney General Environmental Protection Bureau. The bottom line is that the district has been breaking the law for at least the last 4 years. Chapter 85 does provide for school boards to adopt an emergency resolution to address emergency situations related to the fields, but the guidance explicitly prohibits pesticide application, quote unquote, for routine or repetitive pest problems. Further, the guidance says emergency determinations should only be sought or granted for a one-time pesticide application for a specific situation which presents a true emergency. Thus, the multiple resolutions which result in multiple applications under each resolution are illegal, and as a result, the school district has been acting in an illegal manner for years. The reaction of the school district to the recent media coverage suggests that they will file the emergency resolutions with the state going forward, misses the point. It is the repeated application of banned pesticides that is the issue and has placed the school district in violation of the law. This illegal action must stop. I am asking the school board to take 2 actions immediately. First, the resolution that was adopted at your September 11th, 2018 meeting must be rescinded. It is illegal and it allows the district to continue to break the law. Second, given the outrageous actions and inactions by Superintendent Robinson in repeatedly bringing these illegal resolutions before the board, deceiving them with outright fabrications in order to get the board to approve them, and failing to submit them to the state as required by Chapter 85, I am asking that the board begin to take immediate steps to fire Mr. Robinson and replace him with someone whose credibility the board and the community can count on. Thank you.
Thank you for your
I will
comments.
give,
Can we get?
I have a
Okay,
packet
thank
for
you.
each of the board members.
Okay. While Mr. Harris does that, are there any other public comments? Any members of the public that would like to comment? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
There you go. Good evening. My name is Christine Bodigig. In April, the district held a community-wide safety meeting. Superintendent Robinson made a PowerPoint presentation explaining various safety measures in place. On slide 10, which is the first page of the packet I just handed out, you will see Mr. Robinson said the district has periodic meetings with federal agencies, including the FBI, Homeland Security, Secret Service, DEA, and ATF. I wanted to learn more about these meetings. I filed a Freedom of Information Law request with the district for any materials related to these meetings. Superintendent Robinson's own office responded by saying there are no records of any such meetings. I have included that response in your packets. To be clear, this is a different response than if records existed to which I was not entitled. This response means not even a calendar appointment for these periodic meetings exists within the district. Then I filed Freedom of Information Act requests with each of the federal agencies listed. While the Secret Service response is pending, all of the other federal agencies returned the same response as the district: no records. The written responses are included in your packets. I went back to each and asked that they take the additional step of searching any local field office. The result was the same: no records. There was one exception. The National Programs and Protections Directorate, a division of Homeland Security, had a calendar page indicating a meeting with the sheriff's office. It's relevant to point out the meeting took place after the April security meeting, so not part of the meeting Superintendent Robinson discussed, and it only happened once, so not periodic. But the response serves as proof that the search terms used would have turned up records at other agencies if they existed. Given this evidence, including from the district itself, I'm left to conclude these meetings never actually happened. If the meetings did happen, then the administration has broken the law by failing to disclose them under FOIL. Either conclusion is deeply disturbing. 10,000 students, 1,500 staff, and countless community members rely on the district to be truthful. I would argue it's setting the bar pretty low, and yet it doesn't appear the administration is meeting it. It is the responsibility of this board to hold the superintendent and the administration accountable for their actions. Further, since it appears the April presentation wasn't valid, I would like to know what's actually being done to increase the security of students and staff, given recent events around the country. I gave several suggestions to this board in March. I'm unclear what's happening with those. Guidance from the federal government from 5 years ago says run, hide, fight is the new standard, not sheltering in place. I'm unclear if the Shenendehowa drills are actually addressing this. I look forward to your response.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? Okay, at this point, we'll move on with our agenda, and let's go to Superintendent's report. If not, then we can go to the overview of capital projects with Kathy Chase.
Good evening. In the audience that will be presenting tonight is Kelly Gaspari, who is our architect from Mosaic, and Augie Freeman, who is our clerk of the works. There's a presentation and a PowerPoint that's being brought up, which provides an overview of the capital projects. As you know, we did a lot of work this summer, some of it planned, some of it additional work. So if Augie and Kelly would like to come up.
Thank you, Kathy. So yeah, I think we'll start with Augie. Anytime, Augie. Augie will give an update on the projects that are under construction.
It seems like it was here a long, long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. But in any case, the crown jewel of the work that we've been doing is the library. You'll be happy to know that the library, as of today, is right where we want it to be. We have actually started painting. By the end of next week, we expect the drywall to be complete. If you walk through, you can look out in the courtyard, you can see the, what are we calling it this week? Sunroom, glass thing?
Atrium.
It's got multiple
Greenhouse.
names.
Okay.
It's the greenhouse. The framing of that is mostly up. All the mechanical systems are in place. Everything is starting to come together. Starting tomorrow, we're going to start cleaning out everybody that doesn't belong, like the guys who were putting up the ductwork, get your stuff out so we can start finishing. By the end of next week or early the following week, we expect to be painting drywall. So we're on target. We have furniture scheduled for delivery on the 17th of December. I had a conversation with the librarian this morning about when he would like to move in. We were hoping to have him start his process right after the new year. So that the planned, discussed opening was semester break. And I think we'll be able to make that with no issue. The contractors have been told to be at substantial completion over the Christmas break and be slowly making their exit at that point. So that part's going along just fine.
And there's a picture up here. It looks like it's still pretty under construction, but once we get to this point, it goes by really fast. So it's really coming along.
Dr. Robinson did ask me this morning if it was possible for you folks to get a tour at some point. He was going to have to check your calendars to see what time you might want to come. I mean, at this point, it's relatively safe.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah,
The site is never 100% safe because kids move in. There's always,
Get a hard hat.
Yeah.
no, I mean, it's not that, but you could, it invariably happens to me on a tour. Everybody walks around like this, and then they step on one piece of conduit, round conduit, and slip. So when I say relatively safe, you get looking at it, and it's impressive, so you look around, and you don't necessarily watch for that extension cord that's still there. So, like I say, it's safe. We would probably plan for when the workers are gone, sometime, some evening or something that you folks are available. And he said he was going to get a hold of you about calendars and things like that. The other projects, playgrounds, carbon monoxide detectors, press box, stadium lighting are at 99.9% complete. I have 2 lights that are coming tomorrow. They're on the high school west side of the stadium where the tickets get taken on that side. There were 2 that were bad from the day they got here, and it takes like 10 weeks to get new ones. They're here. Tomorrow's the first day that it's not pouring. We're going to put them up tomorrow. The sound system, as far as I know, since we made the corrections and re-aiming, has been fine. No issues that I'm aware of. Everybody loves the new press box. It's a magnificent structure. So far, so good, all that. Playgrounds, everything is physically complete as far as contract work, but we are continuing to look at things that we probably should have included but didn't. The painting is still substandard on the striping and stuff. That just not up to where we want. We're withholding payment until that gets resolved. All of the other stuff complete. The roofing project is complete. We are finalizing all of the change order works for the incidental disturbances. That will be coming to you at some point in the near future in the change order to take care of all that other stuff that happened over the summer. But everything was done thanks to Barbara and Clyde and the gang, school staff got you open. So, because we couldn't get enough contractors in the end of August, they just don't exist to finish. But your folks, pitched in and got us open and ready, so we missed no time. That's where we're at now. We're very happy with it, and it's coming along as planned.
Can I ask you a question? What will happen with campus signage?
That's part of I'll get to that right now.
We gotta get approved yet.
Exactly. Exactly. So yes, that project, along with a couple other miscellaneous things, are the remaining items from the 2016 referendum. The reason that we had held off on the signage until the last portion of the 2016 referendum is because we knew we were doing some of that traffic study work, and we didn't want to put in signs that would then be moved as the roads moved around. So that project right now is into SED. We've received architectural comments on it, which is great, but engineering review is still 8 months away.
Oh, wow.
So what we may have to do is they have a process called third-party review, and that's where you can pay to have your project reviewed, but it happens in an expedited manner. So we are keeping an eye on the timeline, and that may have to be our next step so that we can get under construction this coming summer.
How much does that cost for a third-party review?
It varies, there's a sliding scale, and it varies for the size of the project, and I don't know offhand what
Okay.
these projects would
We'd like
cost.
to know that.
I will look that up, definitely, without a doubt, yes. So that's that for the 2016 referendum. For the 2017 referendum, the phase 1 of that project is into SED right now, kind of the signature. There's a bunch of miscellaneous items. The signature items are the high school east cafeteria and kitchen that is getting renovated, as well as all of the traffic study changes that we're making, the road work changes that we're making. Also, part of this project is, it was meant to be in the summer of 2019, we were going to do abatement and soft demolition of the science and technology wings. And actually, I had told you, I thought maybe this time when I came, I would have some exciting designs. But we are working through the logistics of that right now. Given some of the things that happened over the summer and how tight timelines have become, we're trying to look at the logistics of how the science and technology work should happen, what summers they should happen over, and what we can do to not take as many classrooms offline as, you know, the entire science wing and the entire technology wing. You guys have amazing utilization in your high school, so kudos for not wasting any space, but it does make it tricky when it comes to construction. We don't have any swing space to move people around. So as of right now, the set that is into SED does have abatement and some soft demolition of the science and technology wings. We're still looking at what would be the best way to package those things. That's in the same boat as the project we just talked about. We have architectural comments. We're still waiting for engineering comments and may have to go to a third-party review. The phase 2 of that project is in design. That's the actual renovation portion of the science and technology wing. So what their final, you know, design is going to be. Again, it is under design, and we're talking with teachers and getting ideas of what they need in this space. But we're still trying to figure out the logistics of all of the timing of that. And then the last phase of the 2017 referendum, the phase 3, that's the Smart Schools project. So it's technology, phone, and security upgrades. That is into SED, as well as all of the Smart Schools paperwork. There's a bunch of investment paperwork that needs to go in. All of that is into SED. It's an engineering-only project, so it's waiting engineering review, 8 months away. Same thing. We'll keep an eye on the timeline. We'll figure out costs of third-party review, and then let everybody determine the direction that you'd like to go with that.
Those checks for that get paid right to Cuomo, or do they go somewhere else?
I know, it's like, stop.
It's definitely a blackout situation. There's no other way to say it. Just pay to play. You want to get to the front of the list, only up 30 grand, we'll move you up. It's not.
So,
You probably have something more relevant. I'm satisfying my curiosity. Go ahead.
and it's one payment, if we're talking about one section versus the smart schools, it'd be one payment for a third-party review, or they're all separate payments?
They would all be separate.
Okay.
This is simply a personal curiosity question,
Sure.
okay? Prior to the opening of school, prior to the competitive football season, we just got the lights up. I went by the field, and all the lights seemed like they were shining down, and I said, oh, well, I just got to aim the lights now. But I drove by it tonight, and I still got the same perception. So obviously, the shielding is for light pollution upward rather than anything else. But how is the light dispersed now if they're not, individually aimed the way conventional?
They are actually computer aimed.
They are aimed.
Moscow does a full model, before we ever built anything, they do a full model of the stadium, three-dimensional. You can see every inch of every space. And the design is so that your neighbors don't complain about your spilling over, like the neighbors at the apartments and whatnot. It's made to just like the fields.
There's no shadows either.
There are no shadows.
No
It
shadows.
is perfect light.
Yeah,
It's not
always
directed
a
in any
problem.
way. Everybody that's played on it to date absolutely loves it. And there was one thing that I didn't know, and you maybe didn't notice. If you look at the big poles, you'll see there are two lights that shine up. And I went after them, I'm like, these are wrong. Why are they shining up? That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. Those are called ball lights. And so with the LED lights are so focused, if you didn't have those when you kick a ball up high enough, it disappears. You won't see it at all. So these lights shine up, so it shines on the bottom of the football, soccer ball, whatever's in the air. So you can see it. So if somebody says, why are those lights aiming the wrong way? They're not. But these are very directional, very focused, and every single head is moved like 1.5 degrees to be exactly where it needs to be.
Okay, thank you.
Was there anything that we missed?
I don't think so. You can,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Mrs. Carmen to speak about first reading policies and procedures. Please come forward.
Good evening. So tonight we have first reading policies that were from October's policy review meeting. And the bulk of them were really not many changes except for policy 6121, which is sexual harassment. And that had several changes, obviously, to be in compliance with the new law.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Policy first reading? Okay. We look forward to working through it for next month. Let's go to consent items. Can I have a motion on the treasurer's report? Motion, please. Thank you. First, Naomi. Second, Deanna. Any comments or questions on the treasurer's report? If not, all in favor? Okay, let's go to minutes. Any objection if we combine both of them?
Oh, yeah, I need to split them because I was not here for.
Okay, we'll keep them separate. Okay, minutes of 9 October. Motion, Todd. Second, Gusta. Comments, questions? All in favor? And then minutes, October 23rd. Can I have a motion? Gary first, Gusta second. Comments, questions?
I'm going to abstain from this.
Abstention from Mr. Gilbert
And myself, because I wasn't here, I was only here for executive session.
and Mrs. Hoffman. So that still gets us 4 for a quorum. So all in favor of the remaining 4? Okay. Let's go to action items, business items. Let's start off with approval of ECA clubs, non-cash clubs, and classroom accounts for 2018-19. Motion on this one? Going once, no motion. Second, one from Deanna. Second motion from somebody. Gusta, okay. Questions, comments on this? If not, all in favor? Okay, we have second item of bid, football equipment reconditioning. Let's start off with a motion. Todd, second. Deanna, comment, questions? If not, all in favor? Third item, certification of uncollected taxes. Can I have a motion to take this? Todd, Naomi, second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Let's go to number 4, a $1,500 change order, so relatively small. Motion to take this one to the floor. Deanna first, Gusta second. Comments, questions? All in favor? We've got a contract for Tyler Technologies boundary planning. Any objection if we combine that with 6 and 7? They're all contracts. Okay. Can I get a motion for 5, 6, and 7? Deanna first, Todd second. Comments, questions? All in favor? Okay. And number 8, private school placements. Motion to take this to the floor. Gary first. Anyone second? Naomi second. Comments, questions? All in favor? Okay. Lease agreement, CCM Associates. Motion to take this one to the floor. Deanna first. Anybody second? Todd second. Comments, questions? All in favor? Okay. And with gratitude, scholarships and local grant donations. Motion to take this one up. Naomi first, Gusta second. Comments, questions? All in favor? And last one, the tax tertiary settlement with Cisco. Motion to take this one up. Gary first. Anyone second? Deanna second. Any comments or questions on this one? Okay, all in favor?
It's the resolution.
And so we've addressed all the action items. Let's move on to special education placements.
I have recommendations from the Committee on School Age Special Education and Preschool for the month of October.
Any questions? If not, motion to take this one up. Gusta first, Todd second. Any comments, questions again?
I don't understand why we make her come up all the time to do this, and we never ask you anything. It's feel bad you come here just to do that.
I get my steps in.
Yeah, there you go. Get your steps in. All in favor? Okay, moving on to staffing requisitions. Mrs. Bush, go ahead, please.
Good evening. We have one additional new teacher, actually returning. Christine Pachero is going to be coming to this middle school special education teacher, and we are still in the process of hiring staff, whether it be teachers or classified. We do have some retirements that I'd like to recognize very quickly. Jillian Stiles is an elementary teacher at Oranjan. She's going to be retiring in February after 15 years. Jim Bowlers, custodian at High School West, retiring after 20 years in early January. John Brisson, retiring after 26 years at the end of December. Marion Brisson, retiring after 26 years at the end of December. Suzette Engel, school monitor, retiring after 20 years. And Deb McBride, retiring as a bus monitor after 28 years. So quite a lot of service to the district.
Motion to take this one. Todd, second. Naomi, any comments, questions? Okay, all in favor?
Thank you.
And moving to policy for second readings, welcome back, Mrs. Carmen.
Thank you. So we have second reading, and these policies are from September's policy review meeting.
So the only question I had was the rescind comment. I thought, so let's see, 3050 F1, that you have is rescinded, but I thought we were combining them. So there's 3210 and then there's 3150. Actually, I hope I wrote this down right. It's 3150 F1 rescind. Looking at these, I did see an edit there, but I thought one was replacing the other.
No,
Student
so,
privacy, confidentiality.
the one that we're rescinding was the one that was the special education, that pertained to special education only. And that
Okay,
was
so-
out of place, and it didn't belong in this particular spot. It really pertains only to special education. And at some point, somebody threw that one in there, and it really doesn't pertain to that particular policy. So it's a special education, and in working with Michelle, if it's something that she needs from her line in the special education world, that's something we're looking at from her side. It's a form that is not used at all.
So it's 3210F that's actually getting rescinded, not 3150F.
There's two rescinded.
There's two rescinded here.
3150F1 and 3150F will combine.
They were combined to one.
One of them.
3210.
Okay. So we still have a form.
Yeah,
It's under
there's still a form,
3150F. And the second
3210
rescind is
is
something that
We weren't
sort of
using.
got put in there but went away. Okay. Good question.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Can I have a motion on this one? Gusta, second. Naomi, no more questions? All in favor? Okay, done with the policies. We now have time for more public comments. If anybody from the comment wants to make them, you had your hand up. Anything you want to?
If nobody has in public, I can go up front, so I just wanted to throw a few things out, if that's okay.
Certainly, go ahead.
Just really quick, I didn't get to go, I chose not to go at last minute, not to the convention, only because I stayed back as sectionals kicked off. And I have to say, we fell short on a few of our teams, but I got to tell you, the heart was there. I watched field hockey, football, soccer. These kids work since July. It's a hard season to watch come to an end, no matter when it comes to an end. But every one of these, if they had the chance to come up here, we really need to congratulate these coaches. They really put their heart and soul into everything they do every day for our students that are on those athletic fields. So hats off to them. And everybody always Shen wins. Everybody always wants to be Shen. So we're always the gold standard. So we'll keep doing that. And Bob, I don't know if you wanted to mention, but we were talking about getting the board together off session, not in a kind of executive mode or a formal discussion topic, just to get together. So we're looking at a December time frame, and maybe just to get together holiday time, just as a social, and just connect like that. So just an FYI, we'll be throwing some dates out to you.
We are sort of talking about this as sometime in December. We have one meeting, not two, and so that time slot on a Tuesday would be the time. I think one thing we would like to figure out is, do we do this after working hours or starting at 7? So your comments back would be greatly appreciated. So, okay. At this point, we're done with public comments. We have a policy meeting tomorrow, and we'll continue the policy review process that is in a link for review. And can I have a motion now for adjournment? Todd first, Augusta second. Any comments? All in favor? Let's adjourn. Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.